In this video, we're going to take a shot at our selection sort algorithm. So let's get started. We're going to refer back to this diagram once or twice just to make sure we're going down the right path. So the first thing we want to do here is set up an outer for loop and iterate through the entire array. So we'll set up our for loop for let I equal 0, I less than array length, I plus plus. Now the next step is to assume that the element at index I is the lowest valued thing in the array. So in other words, we're going to assign I to a temporary variable that we're going to call index of min, which is short for index of the minimum element in the array. So we'll say let index of min equals I. So this is our assumption. I think this is the lowest value in the array. Prove me wrong. The next thing we have to do is set up our for loop where we are going to attempt to validate that assumption. So iterate from the next element all the way to the end of the array. And if we see an element with a lesser value, record its indexed in the variable index of min. So now we're going to iterate for let j equals I plus 1, j less than array.length, j plus plus. So in the rest of the array, try to find something with a value less than index of min. So if whatever is at index of j is for some reason less than array at index of min, that means we must have found an element with a lesser value. So update index of min to look at the index j now, because at j there's an element with lesser value. So we'll say index of min equals j. Now we're going to move on to the last step outside of this for loop, where we're going to say if index of the current element, or in other words, if I and index of min are not the same, then we need to swap the two elements. So underneath that inner for loop, we'll say if index of min is not the same value as I. So if these two indices are not the same, then we need to swap the two values. Again, we'll use the pattern of using a temporary variable called lesser. So let lesser equals array at index of min. So the index of min is going to point to the absolute lowest value right now, and that's why we're assigning it to this lesser variable. And then we'll do the swap. So we'll say array at index of min will be array at I, and array at I will be lesser, like so. That does the actual swap logic. And then let's not forget, outside of the outer for loop, we'll make sure that we return our array, like so. So not that bad. If we put together a function to encapsulate the swapping logic right here, if we somehow turn this thing into just swap array at index of min and I, or whatever we want to do, that would turn this into a very brief little solution right here. So not a lot of lines of code. Like I said, I think that actually understanding it, this algorithm is not the worst thing in the world, but I think that the implementation is just a little bit more challenging than the bubble sort algorithm, but still not the worst thing. So again, I know I've said it several times, but I do like to call this the prove me wrong algorithm, because we are essentially making this assumption right here, and then we're saying, try to validate that assumption. See if that really is the index with the lowest value in the array. If it's not, no problem, we'll fix it and we'll swap the two. And then move on to the next element. So that's selection sort. We're now going to move on to our last sorting algorithm, which is merge sort. And this one is definitely pretty challenging, mostly only because it requires recursion to make use of. So let's take a break. We'll come back in the next video and we'll start looking at the merge sort algorithm.